Hello and welcome to Top Voice Tuesday. I'm excited to have Tim Dickey here with us today to talk about the AI powered hype. It's the AI everything these days. We talk about AI a lot on this show, but I think we're going to take a different angle about what happens in the world where products are powered with AI and how those products are making a difference, or if it's just a little bit of hype. Tim, I'm going to give you a chance to introduce yourself in just a moment. But for those of you that are on the live link, please do let us know where you're tuning in from. Leave a question or a comment in the chat. We love to get to those and makes it super interactive. For those of you that are listening on your favorite podcast platform, please do subscribe. We got a lot of shows and a lot of content coming every week, so we're excited to have you here today with us. So Tim, we always like to start with tell us about yourself and tell us what you do and help us get into this conversation about the AI hype train.
So I like to tell people that I'm a refugee from corporate America. I've shifted into professional consulting with a small outfit that many people have not heard of called Improving. And so I left IBM. It's been almost 5 years ago now, and I'm in the space of product development. So our primary mission is to change the perception of the IT profession, and so I get to do that day to day by helping our clients solve some of their most pressing IT needs. But more specifically around this, building software for internal use or external use. And AI has been the space that I've been in the last 2 years, going on three. And it's been an interesting journey seeing how it's been intelligently incorporated in products.
Yeah. So what does it mean? Give us a definition of powered by AI. Let's just maybe use that phrase. But
Yeah.
AI's been around for a while, so it's not like it's really new. There's been chatbots online helping you with your IT service requests and all sorts of things. But what does it mean now? Has the definition changed or is it evolving?
I think what we're seeing a focus on the generative component, the more responsive and human-like component. To your point, Michael, the fact that we've had chatbots forever, it seems like, um, those are rules-based systems built out of traditional machine learning based on business logic. So the responses are pretty much canned. Generative is a probabilistic um, uh, mathematical response to the next word when we talk about chatbots. You know, now that we've got platforms out there that also have a video component, you still got the natural language processing behind it, but you also have an avatar that has a human-like response. So now you're in this weird space where you're going, wow, that is really that's the facial features, the kind of the emotional back and forth. It's getting to the place where because generative is the focus, people think, oh, all AI is generative AI, and that's not the case.
Yeah.
And one thing, and I was thinking about this on the way in, really, if we even go back just about 5 years, think about the cars that have been manufactured with the safety systems. They've got AI components that we weren't even talking about before ChatGPT. ChatGPT became a headline here. What was it? 4 years ago now,
Yeah.
about this time.
Yeah. So let's talk about what's different then, because I was when we were starting to plan for this conversation, we talked about remember there was the I everything phase, there was the Intel inside. It was all about products being packaged with this value proposition of some kind of technology powering the experience. Is there anything different now with the generative AI piece, or are we still just arose by a different name?
I think we see two things running in parallel. One where there is real value, and companies and organizations are thinking about, okay, how do we unlock, say, internal knowledge for our stakeholders, versus those which are just kind of following the trend, where it's like, oh, I'll just slap an AI label on this and it'll sell better. Now whether or not there's actually any sort of AI component behind it,
Hmm.
you know, uh, I like this space better because it causes companies and organizations to go, what is it that we might be missing, that we could enable through having some sort of AI available to our clients or to our customers?
Yeah.
You know,
There's I recall I met someone a while ago who worked in call centers and they helped set up call centers. And of course, the big frustration was, why do I have to push a million buttons to get to a person? I just want to talk to a person. And part of what I hear you saying is there's these two categories. There's the generative AI piece that's trying to get closer to a real human experience, and then there's the let's just slap a label on it. If you had to give a percentage on which how much is in the truly value added Gen AI category, and how much what percentage of products are people just slapping labels on?
that's a really hard one to pin down, and I'm gonna refer back to a recent MIT research paper that said that 95% of the proof of concepts in the generative AI space are failing,
Wow.
um, where they're not getting into production and truly unlocking the value. I think that might be a misnomer in the fact that our company improving in particular has been using artificial intelligence, and I'll highlight a huge um, partnership that even got the client to put out a press release where we built with them, alongside them, an application for food scientists to do better food formulation. And so, on the one hand, you have a calculation engine that looks at all of the USDA statistical data for how much sugar, how much salt, what your ratios on your flour versus your milk. And then we had a generative AI chatbot that we built, and that unlocked 75 years worth of research for their clients to access, to
Wow.
be able to go back and say, oh yeah, um, are, could I have an adverse chemical interaction if I use this over this? And so all this research now is available, and then it can be ported back into the the, the calculation engine. you know so i I like to be more optimistic and say this is probably closer to maybe 25 or 30% of the products that are out there that are being successful at incorporating generative AI in particular. It's higher than that though with other products that are taking other types of artificial intelligence, computer vision being one of them. I mean, the automobile example I mentioned a few minutes ago, computer vision is part of that, and that's an inference type model that's out there, and it's helping to distinguish between uh, the car in front of you, a pedestrian. These are the things that are actually happening in real time in a lot of the automobiles that we drive today through the safety systems.
Yeah, this it's the customer or the more public facing version of like a Waymo, right? That has
Yep.
really the much broader self driving. So that brings up a good question about maybe the types of products. So if I'm the average everyday person, which I am, I know about online software that's chatbot language based. I know things like maybe cars or some limited machinery that I interact with. But what other categories of products are seeing like Gen AI become a big part of the feature set in a productive way?
A lot of it is external or internal to organizations. It's tooling to make processes better and more effective. Um, uh, you know, there are many models out there that can improve anomaly detection, like on an assembly line. So instead of one defect being detected in every 10,000, you've got a defect that can be detected in every 100,000. So you're lowering you're shifting the human response to catching anomalies in the manufacturing process over to machines that are fully concentrated, trained to look at this and go, oh, cool. Here's a defect. Here's a defect. Oh, stop the line. Now we're
Gotcha.
now we're starting to see a trend. Um, you know, this also goes with package sorting. You know, silly thing, right? You think about a package that might come through the U.S. Post or any one of the major carriers. There are fewer packages that get delivered to the wrong destination because the sorting facilities have these technologies in place, and they're much more precise, they're much more direct. And now we don't think about this as an immediate improvement in our quality of life, but when you start looking back, you go, wow, so that's artificial intelligence that's running it. And it's like, yeah, it is. Now, are we feeling it? No, of course not. Are we interacting with it? Certainly, at a distance, but these are the things where I think, when we start to account for artificial intelligence as an entire ecosystem, taking that step back and going, wow, this really positively impacts our lives on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. I it's a great example, and I guess I hadn't thought about the distinction between inside companies and the way that it's being deployed. And I've seen other studies like that, and I've seen other LinkedIn posts of people saying that many of the experiments inside of companies are failing. They're not getting the return. We've got a great
Yeah,
quote here for a comment. I'll read it in a second.
yeah,
And so there's these two pieces of the product world. There's the internal corporate product ecosystem of what you're saying is really process design, and then there's the consumer facing piece. I know enough about product management to be dangerous. I've worked with many of your peers in other places. When I go back to thinking about even like video games, or the design of the first controllers for your hands, there was very much a human centered piece of this experience about the physical interaction. But now we're in this intellectual emotional interaction. This is a little curveball question for you.
yeah.
How does the product management world facilitate that? Because I feel like there's a real possibility for test experiences to go badly with things like hallucinations and stuff, that takes a consumer and goes, I'm never using this again. I don't like this. It's not making me feel good, whatever it may be. How do you resolve that? Where are we in that evolution of the consumer experience?
So there, I'm gonna separate my answer into two parts. Okay, so the first part, which is rapid iteration and getting prototypes out to gather sentiment. There's a lot of tooling in the user experience space that is backed by generative artificial intelligence that allows the rapid change. So we can design interfaces, we can design an experience so much faster than the way it used to be done. So that's a positive move. The other part of that, which is the interaction and the testing that's needed to confirm that the right guardrails are in place with, and we'll focus specifically on this interactive chat exchange. That is a harder problem to solve. And I spent a good portion of my time working on breaking that chat bot with that client I mentioned earlier, because I was concerned about our guardrails. I was concerned that the workflows were properly crafted, that the agents were aligned with what the intent was based on the the exchange I was expecting. Whether that be baking a cake with almond flour or looking for milk substitutes. You know, because the trust and confidence in the generative, it's got to be at the forefront of every product team's thinking. Because to your point, we, if we're not being responsible and setting the right, guardrails and parameters from the start, it's going to go off the rails quickly. Now, some of this too is also the types of models that get used in the back end. We won't get into all the details. A bigger model generally provides a better experience because you're not trying to distill all the information down to small, bite-sized chunks, sound bites, if you will.
Right.
So, that also comes into play. But then there's a cost involved. And so then we're looking at cost benefit analysis and going, how much is too much, what's good enough. you know there's just a ton of different thinking that has to go on, to make that experience robust enough, enjoyable enough, low enough in friction, and of course we're not going to be able to avoid all the hallucinations, but I was going to say humiliations. I don't think models get humiliated. Humans do, but the hallucinations minimize the probability of that happening as as much as we possibly can. Because again, these are probabilistic responses. They're looking at the an entire sentence and going, oh, based on how these words are sequenced, I should respond this way.
Yeah.
Which it's like our conversation here where we're trying to figure out what the right response is, and as human beings we don't even get it right, let alone we can't expect a large language model to get it right every time either.
So I want to ask about mistakes in a second, but I want to get to the comment that was in the chat because I think it's really interesting, and it brings up to me a whole other use case of what you're describing. There's a comment in the chat about someone in Quebec bringing a novel use of AI for the empowerment of voices that remain unheard. For example, those that are psychiatric patients, maybe people who have disabilities, have access issues to language, to be able to give the ability. I mean, this is what Stephen Hawking did years ago with his own ability to communicate when he lost that ability. And I think there's this new product space. Where does that use case of product development sit for you? Because I think these are places where, it sounds silly. Some of us over here are just trying to get AI to help us build a calendar view for the next month of our family meal plan. And then there's some real people that are trying to really create life changing experiences from a product management perspective. Does that change anything for you in thinking about those kinds of use cases?
Oh, certainly. Yeah. In fact, the current client that I'm working with, it's in the medical space, and we're building a vision platform for them specifically. And so I think about improving the lives of human beings. This is our mission. When I talk to the team about it, it's like, look, we have this opportunity to improve somebody's quality of life and even potentially save lives by doing the right thing upstream in all of these processes before it ever makes it out the door. And so specifically around this question, you know, a neural interface, the likes of which a billionaire who will remain nameless has already been working on, having that interface to allow that neural connection to be run through a language model seems to be the next right step for that freedom of expression. You know, yeah, this is the thing. Cognitive neuroscience, in a lot of ways, and I study this as an amateur because I like the way um, it informs how I think about team dynamics, becomes very important in the way that product development moves forward, specifically to meeting the needs of underserved communities. To meeting the needs of people who are in many ways kind of on the fringes of society.
Yeah.
We don't have access. How do we create access? How do we create opportunity? Because to your point, they might be the next Stephen Hawking. They might be the next Marie Curie. They might be the person who actually, because they're thinking differently, um, solve some of the thorniest problems that we have facing us as human beings.
Yeah.
So I look at it and I go, democratizing access to artificial intelligence to create more rich and meaningful conversations. Yeah, this should be something that we're doing just as a part in parallel to all the other research and development that we're doing in this space.
Yeah. And it seems to me that it creates a wide degree of nuance in the answer to the question, does it work? If we were to build a piece of physical hardware or something that was designed, I have a Roomba, let's just use that for an example, and it moves around the house. And somebody says, does it work? Well, yeah, it moves around the house. It gets stuck occasionally. It doesn't know where it is. I have to pick it up and do that sort of thing. And this is not a paid advertisement for Roomba's main competitor. I don't even know who it is. So is that level of does it work is a pretty narrow definition. But in this case, it sounds like, does it work well enough to have enough value to move somebody's life forward? To me, that seems to be a pretty nuanced continuum if we think about all of the use cases that we might consider.
Yeah, it is, and it's both qualitative and quantitative. Because let's say a qualitative improvement is the fact that a person can actually express their thoughts through a language model or some other type of model that now they have a at least an, an asynchronous way of communicating, not fully synchronous, but one directional, and then wait for a response connection into the world that they may be largely left out of.
Right.
So that in and of itself is like 100% qualitative increase or potentially qualitative increase in their quality of life. you the other measurement though becomes very nuanced. It's like, okay, so now we've given them access. Is and now based on the feedback and the experience that they're having, is it something, do they feel like this is a quantitative change that was better for them?
Right.
Because maybe it's like, oh my gosh, you people are absolutely shocking to me. Because they've been working through life in a way that we will never fully understand.
Yeah.
And it's, I think when we take humans out of the loop in any of these conversations, and we completely shift it to the machine, we run the risk of losing the entire emotional connection as to why we're building any of this to begin with, which is to build shared understanding and accelerate that, and hopefully make that into a more common conversation.
Yeah.
You know,
So let's talk about we think about all these use cases. Let's talk about the mistakes that maybe companies are making or product managers are making as they're thinking about building their own chatbot, putting Gen AI into some of their products. Create What are some of the potholes, roadblocks, pitfalls, whatever you want to call them, that's leading to the 95% stat that you shared earlier on, that they're just not getting value out of these product prototypes.
there may be a misguided belief that if you just allow a large language model to work in your environment, that it's going to do everything that it possibly could be allowed to do, and that's really misguided. um, I
Just
think,
plug it in and let it go. That should be it.
yeah,
Okay, I
yeah,
got you. Yeah.
yeah, because there needs to be business logic around how this operates. And I'll give Microsoft some really um, good praise on this. One of the things that they've been working on, especially in their platform with their tooling, is co-pilot agents can be built to work within SharePoint, which is their content management system. So you can put an agent in place. You can specifically sequence relatable content, have all the parameters, say you're an expert in this, and use these documents in order to start the conversation. And oh, by the way, here is the one link to an external source that you're allowed to refer to, in order to augment that response.
Yeah.
And that's just a really simple. Believe me, there's a lot of logic behind all of this, and I am the actor who plays a software developer on television, so I sit back and I go, this is an intelligent use, because in a sense you've got so much business logic already built in, but then you're just describing the problem that the AI gets to solve, specifically to retrieval and having that conversation around the information that it has available to it.
Interesting. Interesting. And as you were saying that, there's a quote in or a comment in the chat about this idea of nuance, from Vaughn. Says, the question is, where can it help you? It doesn't have to be groundbreaking every time. It's about what makes a difference for you. One person's mundane could be another person's zen. So there's an interesting maybe shift that I've been experiencing in this conversation of, are we all becoming our own little mini product managers who are deciding how to assemble these blocks together for us in ways that are helpful?
I think we are, and I think we're getting to a point where the the tools are out there, the approaches are out there that allow us to have individual customization. And by the way, Vaughn, shout out to you, my friend. Glad to see you on the live stream. Um, yeah, and I'll say this because I've been working with GitHub Copilot to solve some problems that I've got. Not I'm not a classically trained software developer. I've got some background and experience in it, but it's been years since I've actually coded anything of any significance.
Most people don't
So
need to code anymore because AI can just do it for you. So you
yeah, well, in
theoretically.
so yeah, this is the type of reading that I do in my free time. Vibe coding. This is actually recently published by Gene Kim, who wrote the DevOps or co-wrote the DevOps Handbook, Principles of building AI agents. So I'm looking at it from the standpoint of vibe coding in many ways is just, hey, I got this idea. I'm going to go into an application interface and explain what I want. Okay. Augmented software development or co-developing with AI, that's an entirely different experience because I'm looking at code as it's being generated. I'm going, oh, this reads right. Okay, this makes logical sense. I'm guiding that in the process of solving my own problem. So, the chatbot, Copilot, is doing all the steps I've suggested that it do to structure an output that becomes an outcome. And I it's not perfect, but it becomes a starting point. And this is actually where I see from the business side, I've got this problem. I'd like to see it solved. Here's a starting point. Here's some code that might represent the actual solution that we get to in the end that could be used in the company, that could be used to solve our customers or clients' problems.
Yeah.
So we're starting to see this approach on an individual basis as well as a team basis where we go, we're using these tools to build this conversation about what we might build. I've got a prototype. Cool. Could we extend that?
There seems to be, and we're getting close to the end. This goes by fast. We could always keep going, and I want to give you a chance to hit some of the high points. But there there seems to be a bit of a maybe a mini transformation going on in the product management world, where you're maybe facilitating a new kind of experience between companies and consumers and employees about how to think like a product manager and how to take these tools and sort of pull them together.
Yes. And actually, I was having this conversation with Michael L., one of my colleagues out of Calgary over the weekend, which is, yes, now we have tools in place that allow us as the humans to be product managers or product owners. And we can get something that starts this conversation around what would this look like if it were fully functional, you know, which
Yeah.
is an exciting thing because you used to be you try and draw something out and throw a bunch of stickies on a wall and come up with a concept. And now it's like, cool, let me spend a couple of hours working on this thing. And then we'll bring it back into the conversation and see how we can extend this.
See how it's evolved.
Yep.
Uh, Tim, this we've covered a lot of ground. I'd love for you to give us maybe 2 to 3 takeaways for the audience that are thinking about the future of the AI powered hype train, where it's going. What are 2 to 3 things that you really want people to take away from this conversation?
So I'm gonna take and pull a quote from one of my favorite presidents, Ronald Reagan: "Trust but verify." So if somebody says, "Hey, we've got AI inside," verify that. Just figure out what that actually looks like. Number two, do some experimentation on your own. As generative AI specifically gets better and better, that capability could truly benefit you both professionally as well as personally. You know, we talked about kind of solving problems through personal assistance and things of that nature. And three, and I think this is the most important thing, which is don't be afraid to be a part of the conversation. We need to have it. It needs to be open. It needs to be um, looking at the benefit for humanity first and foremost. Because we're moving so fast into this space. Sometimes the conversations are getting lost because everybody's focused on the newest, latest
Yeah.
AI inside thing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's great. That's a great reminder. And as we discussed, we I just want to thank you, Tim, for sharing. I know there's a lot more. We'll give you a chance to let people know where to follow you, but we have our closing tradition on this podcast that I shamelessly stole from another one, but I love it. And it's a bonus question left for you by the last guest. And it's really interesting because I think it'll give us a little insight into your personality beyond your AI experience and what you do day to day. So what are you in your life willing to focus on so wholeheartedly that you are happy to ignore everything else that might come up in life?
Having conversations around some of the biggest challenges that we're facing right now. AI just being one of many.
I love that. And I love that. And there's not enough of those conversations going around. And I think, this show was started to have those conversations, and I appreciate you being into it. Is there a conversation that you find most interesting among the big conversations right now?
I think it's the ethical dilemma of artificial general intelligence or artificial superintelligence, and it's an arms race, unfortunately, and you know there it's like any tool. Tools are not good. Tools are not bad. They're just tools. How they get used is that's the bigger question. And how do we put the guardrails in place to ensure that they're benefiting humanity instead of creating more problems for us?
It's a great conversation for those of you listening or watching. If you go back, we had a great chat with Corey Warfield about this very conversation and how far we are away from superintelligence and what that means in terms of the implications, because once you get there, you can't go back. And it's a really interesting, fascinating, somewhat terrifying, potentially, conversation about where we end up. So we'll save that one for another day. Tim, as we close, where can people follow you beyond LinkedIn? Any other connections and anything you'd like to offer up as a final thought to folks listening or watching today?
So occasionally I post to my YouTube channel, which is Tim Unscripted. I have not been nearly as active in my blogging, due no small part to the fact that I'm working with clients who are working in artificial intelligence. So a lot of this is all consuming. So you can go to timdickey.com to see some of my earlier postings, especially around teams and teamwork and all those dynamics. So
Great. We will put those in the show note captions and put all your links in there so people can find it on YouTube. I want to say thank you again for those that tuned in today. Thank you for the comments and sharing some thoughts. The discussion around the accessibility for people with other challenges was really, really interesting, and I think really sends a really cool message about where this could head. For those of you that are enjoying the podcast, if you're listening on your favorite platform, please do be sure and subscribe. This is episode 41, I believe, in our inaugural season. What started as an experiment is continuing, and we've got some big things coming into next year. So please do subscribe to that, to YouTube. We have a newsletter that comes out on Fridays. We're going to be modifying that a little bit as we go forward into the next year. So thank you again, Tim, for all your wisdom. Thank you for being part of the Top Voice community. For those of you listening in, and we'll see you next week.
thank you, Michael. Appreciate the invite.